Welcome to Moment of Truth with Amy Chen Mills, presenting clear thinking on confusing topics in deeply challenging times. Today we have a special guest on our show named Aziz Abu Sarah, and I had the opportunity to see Aziz speak at our local temple, Temple Bethel in Aptos, California, with his working partner, Maoz Inon. Both Aziz and Maoz, who are Palestinian and Israeli, respectively, have lost very close family members to the, quote, other side's military forces, militant forces, etc. They are now on a worldwide peace tour. I really truly feel that in the midst of all the horror that we are seeing in Gaza, in the occupied territories, in Israel and around Israel, in other countries, it is so important to focus on those people who are looking to create peace, who are building relationships now as I speak. Thank you for listening. We are very pleased to have as a guest with us this evening Aziz Abu Sarah, who is the co-founder of Interact International, a Palestinian peace builder, author, and mission-driven entrepreneur whose personal story of transformation began after the tragic loss of his brother, who was murdered by Israeli soldiers. From seeking revenge to championing peace, Aziz has dedicated his life to advancing reconciliation through innovative initiatives in Palestine, Israel, and over 60 other countries. As a National Geographic Explorer and TED Fellow, Aziz has demonstrated the power of travel as a tool for peacemaking. In 2009, he co-founded Meji Tours, a leader in responsible travel and creator of the pioneering dual narrative method, which uses travel to foster understanding and dialogue. He has used travel as a platform for fostering understanding and dialogue in over 30 countries, including Northern Ireland, South Africa, and Israel-Palestine. In April 2024, at the annual TED conference, Aziz and his Israeli partner, Maoz Inon, delivered the opening session's first talk, which became the third most watched TED Talk of the year. The nonprofit he co-founded, Interact International, is focused on advancing sustainability, education, and cross-cultural connections, and he has served as the executive director at the Center for World Religions, Diplomacy, and Conflict Resolution at George Mason University. He is also a former chairman of the Parent Circle Family Forum, a network of bereaved families advocating for peace. Aziz is the author of 2 books, Crossing Boundaries, A Traveler's Guide to World Peace, and Strangers, Neighbors, Friends, Muslim, Christian, Jewish Reflections on Compassion and Peace. Currently, he is co-authoring a book with Maoz Inon, expected to be published in April of 2026 by Crown Publishing House, and currently, right now, available for pre-sale. Welcome, Aziz.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so I think you're on the East Coast now, so tell us where you are at the moment and what you are up to, like, let's say this week.
I'm in South Carolina right now, and I'm getting ready to head back to Jerusalem. I was there 2 weeks ago, and I'm going to be there again by the weekend, and going there to work on the opening of our center in Nazareth for Interact. We opening a peace center, basically a cultural center in Nazareth, which is the second largest Arab city within Israel. And usually, I think for whatever reason, these places, the Arab towns and cities and communities within Israel are not given as much attention. And so this will be one of its kind. It's the first of its kind of a center in Nazareth, serving tens of thousands of Palestinians and encouraging Israelis and Palestinians from other places to go. We're doing an event on September 21st. That will be the International Peace Day. We're having dozens of organizations joining us in doing this event, inviting hundreds of people. And I'm very much looking forward to it.
You know, it's kind of remarkable to think about people traveling to Israel and Palestine at this time. Like, there's so much war that you hear about, so much bombing and starvation and, you know, mass murder, genocide. People use different words, but it's all very, very horrific. And so to think about people traveling back and forth, I actually met you at our local temple here in Santa Cruz County, Temple Bethel, where Rabbi Paula Marcus had brought you and Maoz to come and speak, and she goes back and forth as well. And so I guess I'm wondering, like, when you travel, I guess it, besides all the war making we see, there's also peacemaking, it sounds like. And so it's hard to visualize that. And it seems like part of your work is to bring that forward, that there are people making peace. So when you talk about this, it's a peace center. Is that what you were saying in Nazareth that you're creating? And you're saying mostly for Palestinians with also Israelis, yeah, or Jewish Israelis, yeah. And so what will happen there? And, like, what do you imagine happening there besides the conference?
Well, in addition to a space for meeting, a space for Palestinians there to meet with each other, but also for Palestinians and Israelis to meet together, there'll be a dual narrative center where we will do exhibits there and events at that dual narrative center. I've been working the last 2 years on creating content for this center where we have videos already of how Israelis and Palestinians see the past and see the present, but also how can we envision a different kind of future and what are the possibilities of this future. So there are hundreds of videos we already have created, and we're working on creating an exhibit and creating kind of a smaller museum, let's say. And the hope is to also take it beyond the center in Nazareth and be able to show it elsewhere. The other reason we wanted to start this center in Nazareth is to invite other organizations to come and do events and work within and with the Palestinian communities in Israel, because often I think people want to talk to the Palestinians, the West Bank, and that's very important, and in Gaza, and that's very important. But we can't forget that 2 million Palestinians live within Israel, and they are part of our society, and they need to be, and they are involved. It's just not so much in their own communities. So we want to come and work with them in those communities. So there'll be a mix of things will be going on. We're inviting some organizations to partner with us. We're working with an organization now who's interested in coming in to help with youth employment in Nazareth as well. And that's something kind of unique, because often people like to think that peace building is not connected to economics, is not connected to humanitarian work, is not connected to education. And we're like, oh, we're here to talk about peace. However, if people have a need, you need to come and fill that need. You can't just come and say, here's what I would like to do. So we've been engaged, Maoz and I, and Interact, heavily in education projects. We've been giving scholarships to Palestinian girls in the West Bank and Gaza, for example. In West Bank, East Jerusalem, we can't at the moment in Gaza because there are no education happening, unfortunately, in Gaza for the last 2 years. But we able to give scholarships, create internships for young women specifically, because many young women are forced to leave education as economics in the West Bank and East Jerusalem are terrible right now. People have lost a lot of jobs after October 7th, people not able to work within Israel. And so the reality is they can't afford anymore going to college. So we created a scholarship program, we created an internship program, so we can help with those in need, but also they can help us as well. And so the internship program is for them to come and support us and work with us and see how can we bring peace building through many different avenues to our communities.
Yeah. Wow. So there's a lot going on, it seems like. And I have this one question that I want to ask so that I don't forget it. But I want to go into your history and how you met Maoz and, all of that, which I think people who haven't heard the story will be very interested in. So with all this activity around peace, I think a lot of people think, oh, they must hate each other. The Palestinians must hate the Israelis. The Israelis must hate the Palestinians. And I will make a disclosure to you that my husband is actually Jewish Israeli, and I'm not allowed to speak for him, his opinions or anything. But, he will talk about times in the past when Palestinians were coming to the weddings, in their village, and people were working together, and it was it wasn't fair or just, right? But there was more interaction. Is that so? I guess my question is, of the Palestinians that you see and work with in Israel, in the occupied territories, does there seem to be a longing for reconciliation and peace, even when there's so much to be angry about? There's so much to be upset about.
So I want to start with what you just said because it is very powerful and very important. The longer we don't solve problems, the worse those problems become. So in my lifetime, from 1980 until now, I have seen things progressively get significantly worse and dehumanization gets significantly worse. And people keep saying, oh, well, if we wait to the next generation, things will get better. No, it doesn't. Things get worse when you don't solve it. And so when I was a kid, you could travel back and forth. Palestinians in the West Bank could travel back and forth. Israelis would come and shop in our neighborhood. Now, I didn't know them. We were still somewhat segregated, especially for me. I didn't really have any relationship. Settlements started getting built. Those settlers would attack our villages. I'll throw rocks at them when I was 7, 8 years old. And then checkpoints got worse. And then a wall is being built. And things get worse. And then there's so much more violence. And we went from a significantly less violence to accepting, like today we accept that every hour a child is being killed in Gaza. Every hour for the last 2 years. And that has become acceptable. That would not have been acceptable 20 years ago, 30 years ago. Now, there was still a high level of violence, and it terrifies me. What will be acceptable and normalized in 10 years? What will be acceptable and normalized 20 years? Will we witness a complete annihilation of Palestinians? Will we witness a complete change of the world order, not only in Palestine and Israel? Because I think one of the reasons probably some people abroad, outside Israel and Palestine, don't care is they say, well, it's a problem thousands of miles away. Why would I care? It doesn't affect me. However, when we change the rules of the game, when we change what's acceptable, it will affect everyone, because then other countries will say, well, okay, Israel can strike Qatar because they saw somebody there. You designate this organization as terrorist organization. Guess what? There are people who are designated as terrorists in every country by some other country. There are people in the United States that Turkey designated as terrorists. Does that mean they can now come and bomb the US because, oh, well, we think this person is? It's changing how the whole world is working, and that is terrifying. Now, with that being said, I think you touched on something very important, is we only see the hate on television, on radio sometimes, on even a lot of social media. You see all the manifestation of hate. I see all these accounts of influencers who would go to the West Bank and they're like, will pick the Palestinians who will say, yeah, I hate Jews. And then you'll see the vice versa. The accounts who will go and interview Israelis are like, yeah, I hate Palestinians, want to kill them all. I spend time with both communities, and that's not the reality. Yes, there's a lot of anger. Yes, there's a lot of pain. Yes, there are people who are consumed by hate, but that's not everyone. And there are a lot of people who still working together. We're not the majority. I'm not going to fool you. We're not the majority. But the truth is, you don't have to be the majority to be able to make social change. We can learn even from the extremists in our surroundings. Look, Israeli settlers, they are 7 to 8% of the population in Israel. Ben Gvir, I don't think represent every Israeli. I don't think he's the majority. Or Smotrich, or I don't think Hamas also represents all Palestinians. By the way, Hamas, everyone says they won the election in 2005 to 2006. Yeah. They weren't the majority of votes. Majority of Palestinians voted for other parties. So they weren't the majority. Now, we know how political systems work within the US as well. You can win an election without being the majority. But with a minority, they were able to shape the policies and politics of the whole region, not even only of Israel and Palestine. So we, peace activists, can accept we're not the majority. We can't maybe always convince everyone to be with us, but we still can't shape the future. We can't predict it. We can't change the past, but we can always work to shape the future. And that's what brings us together. And there are so many individuals, organizations who are working together in nonprofits, in businesses, in health, in so many different fields in education that unfortunately are not given, their voices are not amplified. And that's part of why I'm here and why Maoz and I are doing the work we're doing is we want to amplify those voices. We want to make sure people don't only hear that there's no hope, that there's no future. The opposite. We're saying there is hope and there is a future, but that depends on us and what kind of future we push for rather than just sit and watch and say, there's nothing I can do.
Yeah. One of the things you said when you spoke at our local temple was, we could argue about the past all day and all night for years. What's more important is what are we going to do about the future? And that just really struck me like, yeah, we could argue you did this and you did that and you broke this and you broke that or whatever. But that doesn't give us a lot of hope for the future. Now, having said that, I want to go into the past a little bit so people know your story and who you are and your relationship with Maoz, who is Jewish and Israeli and whose parents were killed on October 7th. And that two of you are very close. You're like brothers is what I've heard you say. So let's go. Can we go back to your experience with losing your actual blood brother and then how you met Maoz and then what happened after October 7th?
So I grew up in a suburb of East Jerusalem in Bethany, Azariah. It's known in the Bible as the place where Lazarus was raised from the dead in the Gospels. I'm the youngest of seven, by 9 years younger than my next brother. And when I was 9 years old, my older brother, Taysir, was arrested from home on allegation of throwing rocks. He refused to confess to the charges. This is a time in the first Intifada, first Palestinian uprising, where Rabin was the defense minister, and he said, break the bones of anybody who throws rocks. He was taken to prison. He was beaten up, tortured, until he would confess to the charges. After about a couple of weeks, he did sign to whatever the charges were. But by then he had injuries, internal injuries. And by the time he was eventually sentenced and released from prison, he got out of prison and, we took him to a hospital and had a surgery. And then he ended up dying as a result of the beating and torture he had in prison. I was 10 years old when he died, so it took a year. And a year since his arrest. And it's very hard to explain what you go through when you're 10 years old and your brother is killed. All I could remember is the soldiers who arrest him, remember visiting him in prison. I was angry, I was bitter, and I wanted revenge. And that was what I focused on for the next 8 years of my life. That's what consumed all my energy, all my thinking. But when I finished high school, I ended up going to study Hebrew in an ulpan, which is where Jewish immigrants go to study Hebrew. I was the only Palestinian in that ulpan, in that class. And it really shaped a lot of who I am today. And I was kind of lucky because the people you encounter really do change you, even if they don't realize that they changed you. And I had this incredible teacher, Israeli woman, who realized on the first day when I walked into that classroom how uncomfortable I was. And she walked to me with the biggest smile and welcomed me in a few words in Arabic. She didn't speak Arabic, but she knew a few words. And that was the first time I felt an Israeli has treated me like a human being, that I was seen as a person, as an equal. And it didn't change me right away. And the moment, that's not how it works. But, those kind of moments do this shock and awe thing to you. It really makes you re-examine, and it takes a long time. In the next few weeks, this teacher would come to me and ask me to bring Arabic music, and we would translate it together, and then she'll present it to the students. And she's teaching Hebrew using Arabic. She would talk about Palestinian culture, Palestinian leadership, Palestinian politics. And she brought so much of my own narrative into the classroom that made me open to listening to her as she talked about the Israeli narrative, as she talked about the Israeli story, because otherwise it would have been significantly harder for me to listen. When somebody acknowledges you, it's much easier for you to acknowledge them. And so that teacher, without realizing it, I think has ended up shifting my whole life and made me do things I would never otherwise have done. And not made me, inspired me, maybe encouraged me.
Yeah.
I learned for the first time about the Holocaust. I learned for the first time about the pogroms that Jews went through. I learned for the first time about more ancient history. None of that is something I was willing even to learn before. But at this point, I became willing to learn because she recognized my story, and I felt I need to recognize hers as well.
And how did you meet Maoz?
So I met Maoz through travel first. Maoz co-founded Fawzi Azar Inn in the first guest house in Nazareth, and then co-founded the Abraham hostels in Jerusalem and in Tel Aviv and other places. And so we worked together as companies, my travel company, his guest houses and hostels. And I met him only once in 10 years, about 10 years before.
Well, actually,
And
let's back up for a second because I think we missed a part. You met this woman, she changed your perception. And I'm sorry, I
right.
should ask this first. And then at some point, you decided to do peacemaking tours. So that's how much she changed your perception. Was that it, or was there something else that happened that you started to do?
A lot that happened. I right away ended up joining peace organizations. I became part of the Parent Circle Bereaved Families Forum, and then later I joined Combatants for Peace. In Parent Circle, I was the chairman. When I was in my early mid-20s, I was very active, working on education projects, going to Israeli and Palestinian high schools and speaking with students about my transformation, my story, what they're going through. Worked on a million different projects, ran a radio show for a while that was in Hebrew and Arabic. Might have been the first radio show that was I translated. I went from not speaking Hebrew because I didn't want to speak the language of the enemy to running a show with an Israeli colleague who's lost her brother in the army, and where I would translate what we say into Arabic and into Hebrew back and forth. And so went through all of these different projects. And then in 2008, I met Scott Cooper, who's a Jewish American. And with him, I ended up founding Majdi Tours, a tour company that brought this idea that peace building can't be only in conference rooms and nonprofits. We need to bring it into every business aspect, educational thing we do. Everything needs to be about peacemaking. And we thought, what's the best peacemaking? What's the best business for peacemaking? And travel made a lot of sense because when you travel, you're more open to explore things. Otherwise, you don't do at home. It's just the reality of how humans work. We become more willing to talk about things, to hear things, to experience food and culture and even politics in a different way. And so we came up with this thought, if we put two guides from different backgrounds together, it will highlight that. And then you bring multiple speakers and experiences to it from music and food and culture and religion and so on. So in Israel and Palestine, we did an Israeli and a Palestinian co-leading a tour together. And you can imagine everyone I've known told me this is the dumbest idea possible. Who would want to go and hear two people arguing together? That's how people saw it. I'm like, but they're not going to be arguing together. The assumption that just because they're Israeli and Palestinian, they'll be fighting is not accurate. It's absolutely nonsense. They'll have some disagreements, but hey, I have disagreement. The most I disagree with is my dad, probably. We love each other deeply, but we disagree. It doesn't make it an argument. Oh, it doesn't make it, oh, no, I don't want to hear that. So we did it. We put an Israeli and Palestinian guides together, and it ended up going extremely well. These guides became a community, became friends, became family, I would say. There were so many stories I can tell you about, but that will take few hours. People who will, Israeli tour guides, for example, who said, I can see the injustice in Palestine. I will give my vote to my Palestinian colleague because they can't vote. So I'm going to vote what they tell me to vote because it affects them more than it affects me. Stuff like this that was happening, it wasn't my initiative. All we had to do is get people to work together. And then they start coming out with these unbelievable initiatives. So that's just some example. We since then, by the way, have expanded to 30 other countries, like say South Africa, Northern Ireland, the Balkans. And Maoz went through the same journey, but on his own. So he traveled around the world. He realized that the way he tells the story, he realized as he was traveling that he knew more about indigenous people in South America than he knew about Palestinian neighbors who live, 5 minutes drive from his house, and decided to go to Nazareth and started a guest house in Nazareth because that's how he wanted to do it. He wanted through tourism to do something that will connect him to the local community, partnered with the local family in Nazareth to do that. And so it was natural for our companies to do business together. But the two of us didn't become friends, which is incredible when we think about it. We met, one of my tour guides introduced us. We talked for a few minutes, and then he went his way, I went my way. We added each other on Facebook. We became Facebook friends. As we know, that's a true form of friendship, at least in the day.
It can
Yeah, and then for 10 years, nothing. We had zero contact. Our companies did tons of business together. We even created tours together, joined branded product together, but the two of us didn't. And it took until October 7th, unfortunately, it took that long, when the tour guide who introduced us to each other, a very dear friend, Yuval Ben Ami, sent me a message and he said, you remember, Maoz Inon, Abraham Hostels, his parents were killed. And I right away went into Facebook, sent him a message on Facebook. I didn't even have his number on social media, sent him the message, and I just told him that, I'm sorry for what happened. I stand with him, that this is wrong, and that I care for him, and it's my condolences. And honestly, I thought the likelihood of him responding, definitely at the moment, is very, very low. And the reason I thought that, I saw peace activists, people who I knew, posting stuff on social media about revenge and killing everybody, like people who I respected were posting horrific stuff. I'm like, I don't think Maoz is going to respond to this message, but I felt it's important to send it. So right away, I don't remember how long after, but I think within the day, maybe within a few hours, I got a response from him, which was a broken heart. And then I sent another message. He sent another message. And a few weeks later, we were doing Zooms together and then doing events together. And then 4 months later, we met. And that's it. It was kind of a partnership meant to happen. I think partially both of us realized so many of even our own people, meaning people in the peace movement, were lost at that moment. Very few people would talk about Gaza in the beginning within the Israeli community. Very few Palestinians felt comfortable speaking against what happened on October 7th right away because of what was going on in Gaza. They felt, well, if I say something and then look what's happening in Gaza, people are going to think I'm supporting what's happening in Gaza. And the Israeli side, people felt, well, everyone's angry right now. We're not going to touch it. And Maoz immediately, within days, was on television saying, I'm crying not only for my parents, but for the children that are being killed in Gaza. And that was powerful. And I know a lot of people were like, oh, he's lost his mind. But I think it's the exact opposite. And we often kind of say, yeah, we lost our loved ones, but we did not lose our minds. We did not lose our humanity. We did not lose our sanity. Having somebody killed in your family will make you angry, will make you pissed. I read the news every day, and I cannot tell you, there are moments I feel paralyzed. There are dozens. I can't even anymore know the number. Last I checked, it was over 70 who've been killed in Israeli prisons of torture. Just in the last 2 years. And every one of them, whenever I read about one, I remember my brother, makes me furious. Every time I see someone who's suffering, I don't care if he's Israeli or Palestinian. I saw the attack that happened in Jerusalem yesterday, 2 days ago, and seeing people killed, and it makes me furious. No innocent person should be killed, period, regardless of religion, nationality, ethnicity. I don't celebrate the death of an Israeli, Just like I know Maoz doesn't celebrate the death of a Palestinian, it's absurd that people do. So what brought us together is exactly that, is saying, no, we will make it very clear. We're angry as we read the news, but we will use our anger in a way that tries to stop this madness, try to stop the killing, try to stop, like you said, whatever people want to call it. I think it's a genocide. Somebody else doesn't. I don't argue with people about terminologies as much. I want you to stop it. I want us to work together to stop it. And so we see pain and anger is like a nuclear power. And nuclear power can be used in multiple ways. Now, yes, it's better maybe if we don't have nuclear, but we do. And if you have it and you have a choice between using it as a light, as electricity, as power, as energy, or you have the choice to use it as a weapon to destroy, to end life. We choosing to use it as energy and as light. And I think, unfortunately, many people are using it the opposite way. So it's always comes back to how we choose it. It's not being disconnected from reality. People see what we do sometimes and they think, oh, you must be disconnected from reality. How can you talk about peace in this time of so much pain, so much bloodshed? And we say, that's exactly why we're talking about it. Talking about peace when everything's going well is kind of, yeah, cool, nice. But, one of the first conversations I had with Maoz, I asked him that question. It was just a few weeks after his parents were killed. And I said, where do you draw that energy? And he said, if you lost in the desert, what would you call for? You will cry out for water. You are sweating, you are lost, you think you're gonna die, and the first thing you will think of is water. And every time you see this reflection that you think is water, in Arabic it's sarab, suddenly I forgot the word in English, in the desert, and you go there and it's not water, and then you see it again and you think it's water, and you run again and it's not water, but you keep searching for water, and you don't stop after you fail the first time. You don't stop after you fail a second time. He said, it's the same thing about peace. We are metaphorically in a desert, lost, we sweating, we tired, we hungry, and the normal thing you're going to call for is water, is peace in this case.
Yeah. And
Peace
people are dying.
water.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. How do we stop that? Yeah, it would be water. Yeah, it would be peace. Yeah. I wanted to go back and note that the Bereaved Family Circle and also the Combatants for Peace, were those both groups that had Israeli and Jewish, Israeli, and Palestinians together?
Yes.
Yes.
Both
So
of them.
that was the work you were doing. That was the work I assume Maoz was also doing with his hostels and so forth, bringing people together. I mean, the story of Maoz is also very dramatic, like your brother's story, where his parents, I believe, the house they were in was set on fire, I believe, on October 7th, and they were burned in their house. Yeah. So that's horrific. And I remember seeing him on CNN, I believe, or maybe MSNBC, one of those two, speaking. And I was so touched by what he had to say. And he tells a story that I think is important to share of just having some kind of vision. I don't know if it was a dream, but he had a vision of just blood flowing just everywhere. The land was covered with blood. And then I think he started to cry, or in the vision, someone was crying, or everyone was crying.
You're right. It starts to cry, and then the tear starts washing away the blood, and then washing the blood of all of us. It wasn't only him. He says he saw everyone, the whole humanity covered with blood, the whole earth covered with blood. And it was through tears that start washing that blood away and eventually showing a path. And that path was the path that we're walking on now, the path that would lead us to live together in peace.
And how do you interpret for yourself, or do you know, I don't know how much you can speak from Maoz, but are we failing to grieve? Do you feel like the grieving and like just touching base with our humanity and how hurt we are by everything? Is that what, do you think that was the symbolism of that vision of Maoz, is that we need to do something? What is it? Besides, before the peacemaking, let's say there was crying. How do you interpret that?
Yeah, I mean, I think grief is a normal part of a humanity. You can't not grieve. But I think the way both of us have taken our grief is into action. Because when you lose somebody in the way Maoz have lost his parents, I lost my brother, you kind of start thinking, what's the meaning of all of this? You start thinking, what is happening? How can humanity get to this point? And you have to look for meaning, for reason to what do I do about it? And so we found meaning in the work we are doing. We found meaning and hope in putting that meaning into action and saying, okay, we lost our loved ones, but now people are listening to us because of that loss. Do we say nothing or do we speak up? And then do we say what people just want to hear or do we say something that will challenge our communities? And it's, both of us have spent a lot of time reading in religious texts and I like to read from Judaism, Christianity, Islam, and other traditions and faiths as well. And one thing interesting in as you read about prophets, definitely in the Abrahamic faiths in general, you will find that the prophets always looked at what's going on around them and said, this reality is broken. There is something wrong happening and we need to change. And so this is part of what we feel is the message that needs to be told to everyone. The longer we hold on a broken reality, the worse things will get. We need to be willing to step out and stop trying to kind of like put blasters on it and say, we need a real transformation of the way we see our lives, the way we see our neighbors, the way we see our governments. There's also this concept that really bothers me, especially when we are in difficult times like this, you cannot criticize your own, right? I'm sure you hear it in the Jewish community. I hear it also in the Muslim community. And there's a hadith from Islamic tradition that says, help your brothers to victory, whether he's wrong or right. And people ask the Prophet and say, what do you mean help him to victory when he's wrong or right? Because if he's right, yes, I help him to victory. But if he's wrong, I shouldn't. And he says, you help him when he's wrong by telling him that he's wrong, by correcting the mistakes he's doing. And then I hear the same thing in the Christian, especially in Christian Zionist communities and sometimes Jewish communities say, well, God blessed Israel, therefore you cannot criticize Israel. I'm like, have you read the Bible? These are pastors sometimes that says this. I mean, 3/4 of the Bible is God criticizing the government, the nation, the kings, and the whole exile happened because people did not, care for the oppressed, did not care for the widows, did not care for the orphans, did not do the things that God has asked them to do. And he wasn't afraid to say, it wasn't like, well, you need to support Israel, right or wrong. This whole concept is absurd. We need to believe and be clear what are our values, not what country you believe in and what country you think should exist. That's less the issue. It's not even two state, one state. That's not the issue. Do we believe that you and I are equal? Do we believe that you and I deserve the same dignity? Do we believe that you and I have the same, should recognize each other? Do we believe that we have the same right to safety, the same right to to justice, the same side, to be before any law, whatever government exists, that we are treated the same way before the law? If we don't believe in that, then all the politics we talk about is nonsense because it's not going to work. It'll be superiority, it'll be power, it'll be what we have today. Systemic injustice. We see it not only in Israel and Palestine, we see it in other places as well. Because I think we've gotten off track. Instead of focusing on what our morals, what our standards, what our ethics, what we truly believe should be governing our society, we have gone into political games. And neither Maoz and I are interested in those politics and political games. We're interested in the values that define who we are as people.
Well, I hate to say it, but we're probably going to have to wrap this up, to fit into our broadcast time. But
I was just getting ready.
Yeah, just getting started. Yeah. Well, that was the intro. Well, I mean, what happened next, well, from what I know, was that you and Maoz kind of became famous. Like you were on TED. You're the third most watched video on TED, which is saying quite a lot.
Or
I think,
last year, not in general,
okay,
but
for last year, okay, for last year, still that's pretty huge. And you've been touring and you've met with the Pope. And so tell me what you've been doing and then what are you wanting to do next? And what are you asking from us who are
yeah.
listening?
So it's peace activists, peacemakers need to be at the table, need to be in negotiation rooms, need to be where decisions are being made. Right now, it's military, it's lawyers, it's politicians, and we know generals and lawyers and politicians are not the ones that will lead us toward a solution. It's just we know that. So what Maoz and I have decided is, the whole idea of being at TED and being on TV and being in radios and so on, it's a strategy. It's saying peacemakers need to be heard. We need to amplify the voices of peacemakers. So the first thing I would ask people to do, share this interview, share other interviews of peacemakers, follow peacemakers, me, Maoz, but also others on social media. Try to amplify our voices, because if you don't, look, not everybody is going to want to amplify our voices. Not the politicians, definitely, and not the military, and those are not the ones who will amplify our voices. So we need people to do that.
And
We
can you
need to
mention those groups that you think should
I mean, standing together, combatants for peace, parent circle. There are many of these groups that I think are incredible and should be highlighted. But also, I would say the same for human rights groups, whether it's Amnesty, whether it's a Human Rights Watch, which has been doing stuff, B'Tselem in Israel, Al-Haq in Palestine. There are all these organizations need to be amplified, because again, they don't get as much exposure in mainstream. So that's one. But second is to legitimize the voices of peacemakers. You mentioned meeting with Pope Francis, and we later met with Pope Leo as well. And that was really important because it opened a lot of doors for us. When we end up being endorsed and supported by people who have influence in the world, that legitimizes the peace movement. So, and it didn't happen because we reached out to the Pope. I don't think that would have worked. It happened because somebody interviewed us, and then we said, hey, you have connections in the Vatican. Can you maybe help us get through? And took it seriously and started pushing through, and look, it worked. And it wasn't the most influential even person, but when somebody cares, they can make things happen. And so when we came to California, we asked to meet with the office of the governor, and we were able to meet with the chief of staff of the governor. And it is important because people made it happen. People start emailing his office manager and senators and people in the House in California and made it happen. So we need everyone to help push those things, to have and legitimize those who are having those voices, the peace voices. I would say we need to start pushing our governments. We need to make it clear to our governments that this reality is broken and it's unacceptable. We need to pressure politicians. If you believe what's happening in Israel and Palestine is wrong, you need to speak up. The least we can do is to stop sending weapons to the region, not only to Israel, to the whole region. We need to stop making money off death. The fact our weapon factories are doing so well, the fact foreign governments or foreign companies are having branches here making ridiculous amount of money by creating weapons, the fact we're spending $1 trillion on defense, a lot of it we don't even know what that means. Billions are lost in orbit. We need to start speaking up about these things. Everyone wants to talk about AIPAC and everybody wants to talk about this lobby and that lobby. The strongest lobby in the US that no one talks about is a weapons lobby. It's $1 trillion industry.
Yeah.
That needs to be looked at. And that goes back to our politicians. We need to start holding politicians, Democrats and Republicans alike. I think people assume when I say this, I mean Republicans only. No, I mean Democrats as well. There are Democrats who have been very disappointing on this issue. I can name a few, but I won't. And then finally, we need to start really organizing as a grassroots movement. That's true in America, that's true in Israel, that's true in Palestine, that's true in the Arab world. We need to work together and build coalitions. And that's a big part of what Maoz and I are doing. So what can people who listen to us do? Think, where can you help us in any of those areas? If you have money, you can donate to us or to any of the organizations I mentioned. If you have time, you can volunteer. If you have connections, you can help us make connections with some of the organizations or individuals or people of influence that can help us advance this message. If you can amplify our voices, the least you can do is at least share these stories that we are talking about. Talk about what's happening in Gaza, talk about what's happening in Israel, but don't only share the bad news, also give people an action, a hope, something they can do. Because if we only share the bad news, if we only say, look how terrible things in Gaza, look, there's a genocide happening, and we don't empower people to do something about it, it will just make them depressed and honestly even check out. So we need to believe that a different way is possible and inspire people to believe that and give them tools to make that possible, that happens, for things to change.
Yeah. What did the Pope say, Pope Leo, the new Pope?
He is wonderful. He actually invited us and did a talk, and we were the center, Maoz and I, of his conversation. He talked about how this is an example of how Israelis and Palestinians, an example of how civil society can impact change. So we were very, very grateful for his support, and I think that's a place where faith leaders have incredible power, and we keep pushing. Maoz and I actually were just in Italy last 5 days ago, 6 days ago, and met with some bishops and met with some religious leaders. And it's incredible. Like we went to this small town in Italy. I think I was told 10,000 people were there. But because the bishop hosted us, 500 showed up. And I'm thinking, there is no way 500 people would have showed up, regardless who organized it, if it wasn't the bishop. But because he was there, it was his event, and he said, I want you to come. The community showed up. That's the power of faith leaders. But again, he didn't know who we were before. Somebody told him, he looked us up, and he decided, you know what? I want to be involved in this. I want to support these guys. So it doesn't come out of nowhere. We can criticize our faith leaders, but maybe it's because we're not telling them, you know what, this is what I want. Why is our church is not hosting people who talk about peace? Why our synagogue not hosting peacemakers? Why are we only talking about what's wrong and not bringing people who talk about solutions? That's the responsibility of everyone who's listening now and is part of these faith communities, to start going and talking to their faith leaders and inspire them to host. It doesn't have to be Maoz and I, but there are many others who could come and talk and be part of this kind of building a coalition, building a movement.
Yeah. Yeah, I've also often thought if we put as much money as we're putting into weapons manufacturing and this new Trump has renamed Department of War, which seems actually more accurate than what it used to be, but still also kind of frightening that someone would want it to be named that. If we put that much money into making peace, into dialogue, into conversations, into healing, into working together, into tours, we would be in a different place, So anyway,
how the Bible, I'll just say one more.
Yeah.
You know how even in politics, we say whoever fundraises usually more has a stronger chance of winning. Wherever you invest, you will get a result. If we invest $1 trillion in war and almost nothing in peace, that people expect to have peace is ridiculous. But take on Northern Ireland as an example. The moment Europe and the United States said, we want to intervene, we're going to push for a peace agreement. But one of the things they did, they right away put over $1 billion into international peace fund there. And that $1 billion made a huge difference. The moment they were willing to invest, not only by making statements, but actually spending money. You know how much money goes to peace building in Israel and Palestine? I mean, the US right now spends zero. And Europe just, I think, announced 8 million. 8 million. It's nice. I'm happy there's 8 million, but
Yeah.
that's
Not enough.
nowhere
Yeah.
is enough to deal with billions of dollars that are invested into spreading hate, misinformation, disinformation, terrible media, terrible, in Israel and Palestine, it's very hard to find media. Like there's Haaretz, there's 972 within Israel. 972 is a Palestinian Israeli that I was part of it when it started. But then you have a free newspaper in Israel that was started by Sheldon Adelson that is horrible. It tells you usually everything to scare you. So that's what we have to deal with, is people who are investing, not only governments, individuals who are investing billions of dollars to spread dehumanization. And then we have to respond with zero investments usually.
Yeah. Well, I think that 500 is not enough to come and see you and Maoz speak. I have a feeling the crowds will get bigger. I hope they do, and I hope this helps. I'm happy to support you in any way if you come back into the Bay Area here.
And we will. We're coming back soon.
Okay, good. So I'll try to come and see you. And so what is the organization now that people should go to find you or Maoz or the two of you together? Is there a website? How can they reach you and find out how they can help?
It's iinteract.org, the letter I, and then interact.org.
So there's two I's at the beginning. It's iinteract.org. Okay.
That's it.
Okay, gotcha. Aziz Abu Sarah, it is so good to talk with you. I want to thank you so much for your work.
Thank you so much for having me.
If you appreciated this program, join us every first and third Monday at 6 p.m. for our live broadcast, and then pick up our edited podcasts at Apple, Spotify, and at YouTube under the KSQD YouTube channel as the podcast Moment of Truth with Amy Chen Mills. It really helps boost our program if you like, rate, and share our show at your favorite site and write a review. Visit our Substack, Moment of Truth Dispatch, for more on everything we talk about here. Plus, thanks to our entire team, Yanko Nyasu, Meiling Obinata, Todd Zimmerman, Joy Schendeldecker, Michael Levy, and Batcha Kagan. Theme song by Todd Zimmerman of Nativerse Studios, logo by Kathy Krizik, and thanks to the entire KSQD team on the California Central Coast. Shoot us an email at amy@ksqd.org with questions or comments. And remember, if we don't use our democracy, we lose our democracy. And we can see that happening right now. So get busy, people.